All right.
Disclosure, I want to start by saying I am not a psychiatrist. I want to make that clear. Some people think I'm a psychiatrist because I've devoted most of my life to mental health care. And my mom is a psychiatrist, though. Has anyone in here had the great fortune to have a psychiatrist as a parent? One? Who has had the great fortune of having physician parents? One or both physician parents? Wonderful. Both my parents are physicians, as he shared earlier. So literally, I had to be an expert in physician psychology to survive my childhood. And what's interesting, there's only one person that might have had this shared lived experience with me, the gentleman in the front row who also had a psychiatrist as a parent, but my mom, actually, as a psychiatrist, did this interesting thing where, this only happened with psychiatrists, I don't think any other children have had this experience, where my bedtime stories came from psychiatric journals.
Oh dear.
She was in residency when I was just really little. And you know, these needy kids need so much of your time. And she's got so much of her time devoted to listening to these pigs. You know, she just, it just makes sense to multitask, right? So she would read the psychiatric journals to me, and every time she landed on one of those pharmaceutical ads, she would stop and she would tell me to analyze the woman's face. These are 1970s Valium ads. Anyone got the great privilege to see one of these? Usually like really freaked out housewives, right? She had me staring at them, and she would do what Dr. Rakesh Jain suggested we do at breakfast this morning, which is look at the face of the person on the screen, and not just look at the face, figure out the mood of the patient. You know, these are the questions my mom was asking me when I was like 2. So I got really good at analyzing people's faces. And to the point where in high school I'm on a city bus and my boyfriend's like, stop looking at people that way. I mean, it really was disturbing to other people. We weren't used to analyzing people's faces in public. So, yes. Let's see, a few other things I want to share because I'm giving you this is a very one-line faculty disclosure. I want to give you the full disclosure. You've heard about full disclosures. I'm an open book. I don't want to hide anything. I want you to understand who I am, what I'm talking about. By the way, there's no Q&A after my talk, but I am devoted after the wrap-up. There's a 15-minute wrap-up when I'm done. But afterwards, I will stay in this room till the last person leaves, answering any and all questions that you have. If you have to run out in the middle of my talk, because your flight's leaving, idealmedicalcare.org is my website. I return every single email, every single phone call. So your question, I guarantee, will be answered, whether it's here with the group or later. So the problem that happened for me is when I entered medical school, I loved every specialty. I loved it all. And so it was hard for me to pick what to do because I didn't want to exclude any organ system, any gender, any age. And so I managed to fall into family medicine. I went to this wonderful residency that had a behavioral health track because if you might not know, but there's sort of 2 types of family medicine residencies. The ones that are very procedure-based. You know, they train you to do C-sections in Alaska. That sounds terrible. And or you could do like behavioral health, which seems much safer and easier for somebody who's had my training, my mom, in the psych training. So I chose that route. And so that's the first full disclosure. I have 4 that I want to disclose. The second one is that I am sort of one of these change the world type people, you know, like the big picture system thinker. And I have been accused of being too happy and also grandiose. This is by other psychiatrists, you know, online and such. And I think it's because I have this unrealistic optimism, according to some people, about solving a centuries-long suicide crisis. This has been going on since 1858. You'll see in my slide when the first reports came out that physicians had a higher suicide rate than the general public. And so I'm very optimistic, excessively optimistic about solving this. Now that I have the data, which I'm going to share with you, I feel like we can actually solve this, because this is a problem that's, it's not like Ebola or something where we'd have to create a new drug or create something, figure out the human genome. The problem with suicide is really that it's been a secret. So suicide isn't really the problem is the secrecy. Once the secrecy can stop and the stigma ends, I absolutely believe that we have the brain power just in this room to solve the physician suicide crisis if we stop hiding it. So I'd like to know how many of you, by a show of hands, know of a physician or a medical student who has lost their life to suicide? So most people in the room. And how many of you, by a show of hands, would like to end this physician suicide epidemic? Everyone. Great. I'm going to show you how in 3 easy steps. It might seem too easy to believe, but I'm excessively optimistic that it will work. The third, I'd like to give you a full financial disclosure about who I really am and how I earn money, because I've been accused of making money from human suffering. Now, most doctors make money from human suffering. That's sort of the business world. If you're making money, if you're not making money from human suffering, raise your hand. No hands in the room, thank you. So I want to just really share how I do this. How is it? For 7 years I've been running a free suicide helpline for physicians, and I'll tell you how this came about in a little bit. But how I do this is I actually have this amazing clinic designed by my patients and community. They wrote my job description for me, so there's no invisible tug of war in the room. We all are aligned in our intentions and goals. And so I'm over here in my family medicine clinic, where I bike to work in my cute little Eugene, Oregon neighborhood. And I do ingrown toenail procedures and pap smears and rectal exams and what else do acne, all this bread and butter family medicine. And I make all this pile of money over here, right, that supports my humanitarian free stuff that I do with doctors over here. Because I've never charged any medical students or doctors for anything, any help that I've given them. And so I run this suicide helpline, and because I'm a late night West Coast person, and there's a lot of people freaking out at 1 in the morning in New York City, residents, they call me. They don't feel safe to necessarily tell their colleagues, in their hospital that they're having a meltdown, but they're like, maybe I'll call Dr. Weibel in the woods in Oregon. And since I'm usually up at 2, 3 in the morning, I end up on the phone for a few hours with residents on the East Coast. And the interesting thing about this is, so I might be on the phone anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours with some people. The worst one that sometimes they call from unknown numbers. And one woman called from an unknown number, and all she did was sob on the phone with me the whole time. Never gave her name. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know what happened to her. But I just kept talking, because you can see I can fill up 75 minutes pretty easily. And I was hoping that something I said might click, right? Might help her. And so what I do with people when they call me, some of them feel immediately better because they were able to share their story for the first time with a colleague without feeling like they were going to be turned over to the medical board or get in trouble or lose their job. And so some of them say, some people email me and they say, I feel better just writing this email to you, don't even worry about calling me back. Great, And some people do need to see a psychiatrist. So of course, I refer them to a real psychiatrist, not a family doctor who lives in the woods in Oregon, ingrown toenails, right? So I do the best I can with the knowledge that I have, but I have a whole group of psychiatrists that I refer to. If anyone in here specializes or would like to specialize in treating your colleagues, please let me know. I would love to refer people to you, because there are people in all different states who need help. And the lovely thing that has happened, as you heard in the introduction, since I have on the side sort of helped other physicians launch independent practices. Many of those are also psychiatrists who've launched independent practices specializing in physicians. So now I have like all these wonderful people who I know very well to triage people to. So that's sort of how I make money. I just want to be completely transparent. There are people that absolutely disapprove of the fact that I am running a suicide helpline, that I'm doing this research, and that I'm an activist in preventing physician suicide. And there's sort of a group of haters online in closed groups where I'm not invited that like to put, you know, vomiting emojis up when they see my name and all sorts of things like, I don't know, I mean, it's just, and a lot of these sadly are female psychiatrists. They've also, this was leaked to me in the last 24 hours. Somebody sent me a whole screenshot of all these things, like how could they have her at this conference, this and that. And I just want to apologize to Dr. Peshtian. If you've been pulled into this, or Psych Congress in any way, if I have marred your reputation, I'm so sorry. But I'm going to do a good job here, and hopefully you'll learn something. And the other thing I just want to say that so there's many things that are critical about our little spreadsheet, but part of it probably just has to do with, like, don't kill the messenger, listen to the message. I'm sorry, I'm not a board certified psychiatrist. I'm a family physician with a good heart. I'm a truth speaker. Like, that's the thing that's probably most important to me. I'm just absolutely against censorship and so pro-truth speaking. And I think that's where the healing comes from. And this is, by the way, not a choice for me. It's like having brown eyes. It's not a choice for me. I was born this way. So I was born, as some people say, oh, this is courageous, that you're able to say, this has nothing to do with courage, bravery. This is like, I have brown eyes and I tell the truth. And I can't help it. That's just who I am. I can't lie. So before I go to the next slide, I just would like to share with you that you all also have a choice. I didn't have a choice. I have to tell the truth. That's just who I am. But you have a choice as audience members. You have a choice whether to believe what I'm saying. You don't like what I'm saying, you can leave. If you want to stay and clap, you can do that. If you want to email me later. I mean, I want to give you the choice to do whatever you need to do, because this is a difficult topic. I will try not to trigger you. But I am going to tell the truth. So, a few more disclosures here. The most important one is that, as is typical of my behavior, I have permission from the surviving members of these physicians who died by suicide, who I feature in this presentation to share their stories. In fact, many of them are honored that I'm celebrating their loved ones. Some of them have reached out to me, and before I even knew they existed or lost a family member, they've read parts of my blogs at their family members' memorials and funerals overseas.
But I want to start with some learning objectives, which are that today we're going to review why physician suicide is a public health crisis. We're going to identify highest risk specialties, discuss why doctors fear seeking mental health care, and I'm going to describe 3 very simple ways that we can all destigmatize physician mental illness. Before I move on to the first slide of the presentation, I would like to share, I have a plea, I have a request. So one of the things that others are so critical of me about is my support of nurse practitioners and other professionals in medicine. And so I know many people here, there are psychiatrists, there are nurse practitioners. I've met lovely psychiatric, physician assistants and psychologists. And I would like, the plea that I have, the request is, if we can please stop the turf war between health professionals so that we can work together. We have a public health crisis where people are dying. And if you can prevent a suicide of a physician, I don't care if you're board certified, I don't care if you're a medical student, I really don't care whether you have a diploma or not. I'm just please asking for you to honor and love one another, and let's truly work together as a team to stop the death, to stop the needless suffering. So thank you. These are our brothers and sisters in medicine. We are brothers and sisters in medicine and nursing. And we are family, like you often hear during this Psych Congress. They refer to us all as a family, and I want you to take that seriously. We are a family. Here's one of our brothers. This is Ben Schaefer. He was the go-to orthopedic surgeon in DC, medical director, team physician for professional sports teams, the National Ballet, Olympics. I mean, this is a job I would not want. How many psychiatrists in here would want to be sitting on the front row of the Olympics, and when somebody has an injury on their shoulder, and that's how they earn their millions of dollars a year, who would want to do that surgery? Like, I don't know, that seems high risk. So, but this guy, there's people that are just built for this. This guy was fabulous, fabulous guy. A kind, sweet, brilliant, sensitive soul. He could relate to anyone, loved helping people. And in fact, you can look at this beautiful man. They called him Dr. Smiles. Such a happy guy. I want to show you. This is Ben Schaefer in high school, right? He was voted most likely to succeed. Now that has a double meaning now that is terrible, right? But look at him. Just look at his face. Do what my mom did with me when I was young. Stare at this man's face. This man is a beautiful person. He was voted also in junior high or middle school, most school spirit, had lifelong anxiety, covered up with a beautiful smile. Look at that. And so here's the situation we're in. Now, why does a happy doctor die by suicide? See, this is the most confusing thing for people. Everyone, nurses, patients, they're like, wait a minute, he was just joking with me yesterday. What do you mean he hung himself in his office? Wait, she just had a newborn baby and was so happy. And, you know, like, people don't see this coming. It's because if what you see is the smile, you don't see the pain, right? And so here's the situation. The backstory with him is that he had just had back surgery. He knew as an orthopedist he was going to recover from this. He was given a good prognosis, but at the time he was like dragging his foot. He couldn't exercise, which is, of course, one of the things that helps you when you have mood issues, right? And so unfortunately, he was weaned off anxiolytics 2 months before, and his psychiatrist just happened to retire during this whole thing, so he was, transferred to a new psychiatrist who told him he'd be on medications the rest of his life, because of course he's seeing this guy at his worst moment and doesn't really have the full picture. And so the day prior to his suicide, he admitted he was suicidal with a plan. But he feared hospitalization due to the stigma and reputation. If you're a guy that's at the Olympics treating all these professional sports players, you can't risk, he thought, right, in Washington, D.C., he did not want to be committed or just be hospitalized for suicide, right? And so this man made a decision to hang himself at home after dropping his son off at work. Look at what we lost here. How long does it take to become an orthopedic surgeon and a brilliant, I read his whole CV, it was like 74 pages. The guy has done amazing work and we lost him. This should be a never event, right? Should this be a never event? Thank you. So here's the shock and the aftermath. These are actual quotes from people who were shocked after his suicide. I came into the office feeling so miserable and left laughing hysterically. I can't believe this is from his legacy page online. Startling news. This is a friend of his who I met at a conference. I was a medical student classmate of Ben's. His energy and zest for life put most of us to shame. His smile was contagious. The most charismatic man I've ever encountered. I will never forget, right before he wheeled my son into the OR for the first surgery, Ben looked at me and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of your baby." Then he looked at my son, who was 17, and said with a twinkle in his eye, "Come on, baby, let's go." And so, what a great surgeon, what a great sense of humor. He made his son, this guy made this child laugh before he went in for surgery. This is so sad. So patients are very confused. I, like many of Dr. Schaefer's patients, am devastated at the news of his death. I called yesterday to check on my upcoming appointment with him. Was hit with a ton of bricks. News, all I can say was, what? Oh my God, what? He was so full of life and energy. I think that's why this is so hard to comprehend. So there's this group of people that we don't think about very much who are very adversely affected by this, which are patients. Now, The research shows potentially that, I mean, this is underreported, maybe we lose 400 doctors a year to suicide. It's probably more because we're putting a whole bunch of them in the accidental overdose category, which I have a problem with because, let me just tell you, a 100% accidental overdose is a toddler on the floor in a bathroom playing with pink pills. That's an accidental overdose. There is no way in the world, you can disagree with me, we can talk later, I'll stay here till midnight, I'm open-minded, I am open-minded. But I personally now, on stage, believe there is no way that a doctor dies by accidental overdose on a drug they prescribe every day to patients. This makes no sense. They totally get into a million meetings with pharmaceutical reps. They know the narrow therapeutic index. I mean, there is no, so it's either a 100% intentional overdose when a doctor dies by suicide because they've lined the pills up and they've done the calculations, right? Or it's sort of like a Russian roulette thing, like sort of like partially intentional. If it happens, it happens. I don't really like my residency. I'll see if I wake up tomorrow. You know, that sort of thing. So I think the issue is that we probably are losing a lot more physicians to suicide than we know of. And for each of those doctors that dies by suicide, they each are responsible, at least in family medicine, the average is 2,300 patients in your panel. Now, I don't know how many emergency room doctors see patients per year, or, you know, in other specialties, but if you do the math, let's just say, you know, if you do the math, 2,000 to 3,000 times 400 plus, you end up with like 1 million Americans or more every year. This is just in America, who lose their doctors to suicide. We've abandoned 1 million patients. That is a public health crisis. And so now I'm being contacted by patients who don't know what happened to their doctor, and they're wanting to know, is the doctor on my registry because they love this doctor, the doctor that delivered their first baby. I mean, there's a doctor in Washington State who delivered, in a small town, 6,000 people in that town, 6,000 babies. He died by suicide in his bathtub because of like an insurance situation, buyout of his clinic. You know, he was like a third generation OBGYN. You know what I mean? He couldn't take it. I mean, oh my, this is just unbelievable. And that patients are calling me trying to get answers to what happened to their doctor because nobody tells them. If we whisper it among ourselves, these 1 million patients are left to go like, just pick, you know what they're told when they call for a follow-up appointment? Pick another doctor from the book. Pick another doctor. This guy delivered my baby, saved my life, did my liver transplant, you know. Just pick another, what are we, like just commodities? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I want to tell you that I actually wrote this article, Why Happy Doctors Die by Suicide. I gave it to Medscape. Well, I put it on my blog. Medscape picked it up. It became one of their top 10 articles in all of 2018 on Medscape. I would highly recommend, it's short, you can read it. I'm going to give you a little quote here from the article, which I love. This came from actually a book from 1858, which apparently is where that original quote came from about doctors dying by suicide at higher rates than the general public. But this is really interesting. Carlini, a French actor of reputation, consulted a physician to whom he was unknown on account of the attacks of profound melancholy to which he was subject. The doctor, among other things, recommended as a treatment the diversion of the Italian comedy, for, said he, your distemper must be rooted indeed if the acting of the lively Carlini does not remove it. Alas, ejaculated the miserable patient, I am the very Carlini whom you recommend me to see. And while I am capable of filling Paris with mirth and laughter, I am myself the dejected victim of melancholy and chagrin. This might bring back memories of Robin Williams and others who have died by suicide, looking really great on the outside. It's a huge problem. This is the book. You have all the slides, so you're free to grab all the original pieces and look them up. This is what's going on here in medicine. This picture, this tragedy, sort of comedy, sad, happy face, like you don't really know what's true or not, right? So here's another man I'm going to introduce you to. Look at this smile. Look at this beautiful smile on this man. Look at that smile. Is that somebody who's going to die by suicide? Well, he died by suicide. He died by suicide, and his brother's a doctor who says, "This is Avi. at work when he's not as happy as sliding down the slide with his child, right? I'm a hemato-oncologist, and my brother was the chief of the ICCU in one of the largest hospitals in Israel. He was the superstar and the smiling doctor. He died by suicide last week. We are still in shock and pain that your article, that Why Happy Doctors Die by Suicide, is exactly describing my brother. I would like to talk about it some more. I ended up on Skype with him and his brother. In fact, I didn't realize this, they had found that article and read portions of it at this man's funeral in Israel. I mean, he went on to say in an email that he had an amazing family, wife and 3 daughters, and look at how many times they use exactly, and was exactly what you described in the article. He was named Smiley. He helped everyone. He was one of the most respected and leading physicians in his hospital, 2 months away from professorship, attending the hospital almost every night and worked the day after, of course, and never complained. He was loved by everyone. He was on his way to a vacation with his family in Spain. And one day, he came back from the garage after fixing his car, went to the field next to his house, and shot himself in the head. This is why your article shocked me. It was the exact description of my brother. How many other doctors are the exact description of this? So many. If you go on Facebook, you can see beautiful pictures of smiley faces of doctors who've just died in the last few weeks. I was going to share this at the appropriate moment here, but I did a Twitter post before the talk just alerting people, you might want to come if you want to find some answers here. Let's see, what did I write? This is my Twitter post. In the past few weeks, we lost a brilliant orthopedic surgeon, a radiology resident, a beautiful young Kaiser physician, a family doc in South Dakota with a contagious smile, and a pediatric residency director who was found hanging in his office by his resident. Here's how to stop happy doctor suicides. Come to my talk at 2:45. Okay, so I think the issue is that everyone is just in complete shock, and they always, in the aftermath, want to know, wait, what could we have done? What could we have done something? How could we have intervened? But it's very hard to intervene when all you see is smiley faces. I interviewed a number of male physicians who survived their suicide attempts, and I asked them, hey, how long between when you sort of made the decision, that's it, I'm going to die by suicide, that's it, I'm going to die by suicide, right? And you actually sort of grabbed the gun, got the pills, started moving. 3 to 5 minutes. Now, if we wait till the last 3 to 5 minutes, it's going to take a lot of heroic psychiatrists and such to jump in there and find these people. But meanwhile, these people have had hundreds of missed opportunities over decades. We're surrounded by like the highest density of health professionals who could help us, and yet we're sort of not doing anything that's working very well, or this wouldn't be a problem. So I am really encouraging you to take action, and the action steps are very simple, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I want to show you a picture of a wall in my home business office that's covered with the photos of doctors who have died by suicide and medical students. And I really don't want to add anyone else to this. I don't have enough space. I'm in a 900 square foot house. I have a very sort of voluntary simplicity lifestyle. I don't have enough wall space for this. And so we've got to really do something, about this. And my partner, he's very funny. He's like, when you go to these conferences, these doctors' spirits are still here. I can feel them here. They live in the house. As soon as they die, they move in. This is really not great for our relationship. I don't know. I mean, just to salvage my relationship, this guy's a musician. He goes, I never thought about suicide before I got together with you. Now all we talk about is doctor suicide. This is killing our sex life. This is not going to work out. I love you, but these dead doctors, all I hear about is dead doctors. This is not inspiring. I don't feel like making music. It's causing a slight rift. He's a sweet guy. He's like living with a house cat. He's very sweet. But the doctor suicide thing, I mean, I need more people to help. Okay. But just to full disclosure again, I, in 2004, was a suicidal physician myself. I'm not a violent person, so my method, I guess I was just deeply depressed. It was 100% occupationally induced. I ended up sort of in bed after quitting my last job, 6 jobs in 10 years, looking for a way to practice real family medicine, you know, the house call, spending 2 hours with patients, really getting to know people. Like 7 minutes in a cubicle, that's all they wanted me to do, 7 minutes. Just wanted me to generate the most revenue per millisecond. I mean, it caused like this terrible existential crisis because I feel like I was born to be a healer. I saw what real doctors did in the 1970s, and they weren't in cubicles and they weren't doing 7-minute office visits. So I was just like, what is this? So it caused me, the occupational distress caused me to fall into like a deep depression, and I was like praying every night that I could die in my sleep. I was trying to like will it to happen. The problem is when you're 36 and you're a vegetarian and you're really healthy, it's so unlikely to die in your sleep. So I'm still here. I mean, I'm still here, and what happened after that, I mean, so I had an epiphany. I don't know it wasn't really a dream, but I did have the epiphany to start the clinic. I was like, okay, if I'm not happy, the patient's not happy. Suddenly it clicked in me, like maybe I could just ask them to help me start the clinic because I'm exhausted. When you're depressed, you're not super creative about how am I going to get out of this, right? But I live in a beautiful, small Eugene town where my patients love me, I love them, and I was just like, I mean, I had a town hall meeting where I said, look, I'm suicidal, I'm depressed. I can't figure out what to do. I don't like a 7-minute visit. You don't either. Tell me what you want, I'll do it. As long as it's basically legal, I'll just do it. They wrote me all these things. I got 100 pages of written testimony. I just followed what they said, and I've been happy ever since for 14 years. My mom thinks I'm hypomanic. She thinks I use excessive happiness as a coping strategy. I'm totally open now that I'm in a room with all these psychiatrists. If you can DSM me properly, you'll save a lot of other people hassle. Because I don't know what's wrong. I mean, am I hypomanic? Am I too happy for no reason? I don't know. But the point is, this is what I believe about mental illness. Well, it's a continuum. But I believe, like, channel your mental illness into something productive. Like saving suicidal doctors, or if you're manic, go into marketing. You know, like there's professions that, like we should match up mental illness with the right profession and give people an outlet, right? I'm just channeling my, whatever it is, excessive happiness, grandiosity, histrionic, I've been called. But you know what? I come from a family of physicians and entertainers. I'm related to the Three Stooges. Okay, so it's like, am I being too theatrical? I don't know, but I basically at dinner at night when I was younger, I used to sit at the table, and my family is so funny. I would fall off my chair laughing all the time because my dad is hilarious. I'm related to all these theatrical people, but suddenly when psychiatrists look at me, they're like, you're histrionic. And I'm an extrovert, and I understand most physicians are introverts, and sometimes I wear glitter, and they're like, grandiosity. I did a talk in a medical school, and I had all these lines of questions. I asked this woman, so what's your question? She goes, I'm just here to see if you're really wearing glitter. I mean, it's like, yeah, like you can wear glitter and be a doctor. You can be a doctor and be a human. It's possible. I'm proof. So what happened, I was at my mom's house. We both went to the same medical school. I'm sitting there, I'm looking through, for some reason she gets the alumni journal and I don't. Maybe she became a lifetime member. I didn't donate any money to my med school. I'm still recovering and paying for therapy to recover from medical school. You know, I don't have any money to donate. So, which people tell me on the phone they're suicidal. They're like, and by the way, what really pisses me off, I just got this thing in the mail and they want me to donate money to my medical school. They gave me all these psychiatric problems, you know. Why would I donate money to the medical school? Fix that place, right? So anyway, I'm looking through this alum magazine. You know, at the end, they have like updates on what your classmates are doing. You sort of want to voyeuristically figure out all the awards everyone won that you didn't, and you want to look through there. And it's like, oh my God, I looked through under obituaries. I saw the name of my anatomy partner who I dated. You know how startling that is? Because he was like 39, and I tried to call his office to see what happened. I tried to track down. You know, then at a certain point, I was like, well, let me back up, leave it to the family. It's none of my business. I love this guy. I dated him. We did some really interesting things in the after hours in the anatomy lab. And so it's like, I just want to know what happened to him. But anyway, so that was one thing. And then this other man who I dated in medical school, I dated him for 3 years. He died suddenly in his sleep, right? I was like, wait a minute, both men that I dated in medical school are dead. So what is going on here? So just to chronologically catch you up, I opened the clinic. I was happily ever after. That was 2005 on April Fool's Day. And then 2012, I ended up in the second row of a memorial service for the third doctor that we had lost to suicide in my small town in Eugene, Oregon, within a year. Top guys, like top of their game. And I was sitting there, and as a truth speaker, you have to know it was very odd. Everyone knew that he had died by suicide by shooting himself in the head in a public park and middle of the day. People were all whispering why. Nobody said suicide out loud during the whole service. Everyone was in the bathrooms in the corners. Well, I just saw him, like whispering. And I was like, what kind of behavior is this for adults? Why are we not... And they wanted to, what they were asking was, why did he shoot himself in the head? That's what they wanted to know. And it's like, we're not going to get very far if nobody will say this out loud, And so I'm sitting there in the second row, and it just, because I kept hearing, I guess I'm an empath, I really pick up on what's going on in a room, right? So I just kept hearing this, why? And then I just felt this, it was like a reverberation in my head, why? And so I just started counting on my fingers how many doctors I knew personally who had died by suicide. 10. I was 41 or so at this. That's a lot of people to know in your profession that have died by suicide. So I appointed myself an investigator of this, not for anyone else's purposes. The reason why I'm doing this, I wanted to know why my friends were dying by suicide. I had no idea this would lead to me helping my entire profession figure out what to do next. This was a personal quest of mine because I had lost all these people. So I am, please help me stop these deaths. I wasn't very smart about, I came up with a list of 35 reasons on the fly that I thought might have been causing this in 2012. I published a blog. Oh, so funny. I had a blog for a year. Nobody was coming to my blog. No comments, no likes, no shares, nothing. As soon as I wrote why doctors die by suicide, it was like 80 comments and a million emails. And I was like, well, this is reinforcing that I probably need to keep doing this. So 5 years later, fast forward, I end up writing a piece, what I've learned from the first 757 doctor suicides. That was picked up by the Washington Post, and then generated, of course, a lot more interest. You know how media begets media. I was very frustrated at the beginning because I kept talking about all these older male doctors who had died by suicide in my town, and nobody seemed interested. They were like, another day, who cares, I couldn't get the media interested. I asked my therapist, this is so frustrating, nobody cares that all these people are dying. And she tapped me on the shoulder because I had figured out some solutions. And she's like, well, you can't really solve a problem that nobody knows exists. Oh no, I got to go back to stage. I got to go back to preschool. I got to go back and do a whole public awareness, decrease professional denial campaign. It was like, so anyway, what I'm saying is I'm extremely happy that the media has picked this up, that there's now been a film, that we're having essentially the media traction that we've needed all along, that medical conferences like this, forward-thinking conferences, are really taking this on. And so here's some of the things I learned from the first 757 doctor suicides. We've known about the high rate since 1858. Physician suicide is a public health crisis because of just the sheer volume of people that are dying, family members, lost survivors that are suffering, and patients that have been abandoned. Like I said earlier, and many doctors actually have lost several colleagues to suicide. And I sort of had this hunch that anesthesiologists were number one in a contest you don't want to win as the highest risk specialty, because I would get emails from anesthesiologists listing 8 colleagues they lost to suicide. I have never received any email from any other specialty listing that many of the same specialty. And so you'll see a graph in a little bit where I actually have each listed by specialty so I could figure out. I thought psychiatrists were highest risk. Just from looking at my mom going, oh no. But anyway, but actually it's not psychiatrists are the highest non-surgical specialty, out of outpatient sort of non-surgical specialties, highest risk. So the methods vary by region, gender, and specialty. Of course, you're using whatever you have. You're stepping off tall buildings in New York City. On the west coast of the U.S., you're using guns. In India, they're hanging by saris, ceiling fans. It's, they just, 3 to 5 minutes, they're going to pick whatever they have, right? And so, people have been critical, like, you're not supposed to talk about this. You're not supposed to list the method. You're supposed to follow suicide reporting guidelines. Like, how are we going to discuss this as medical professionals if we don't, like, piece this apart and get the data? And it is important. Like, if you Google doctor found dead in hospital, those are all male anesthesiologists, and they all overdose in closets and ORs. And one happened in a high-ranking official's husband in my town. Was dead in a hospital for 3 days before they found him in a closet of an overdose, an anesthesiologist. So, this is shocking. I mean, just shocking that you could be dead in a hospital for that long before somebody would notice. Top-rated, beloved doctors are dying by suicide. Doctors develop occupationally induced PTSD, anxiety, depression, suicidality. The personal problems, some people will blame, like, oh, he was in the middle of a divorce. Well, what caused the divorce? He's working 100-hour weeks. He's an orthopedic surgeon, hasn't seen his wife, and they haven't had sex in this long, and he's just throwing money at her to, like, sedate her because he's away at the hospital. I mean, I just want to say, let's stop blaming personal problems, saying he's a sad, like institutions will say, oh, she was sad. Well, why was she sad? Because her human rights were violated, because she's working 100-hour weeks, because she's been bullied. There's a reason that probably, in my impression here, tracks back to professional etiology, including the fact that we've not been able to get mental health care without stigma. So even if you are dying because you just got the last straw there was your recent divorce or your disabled child or something terrible, your house burned down, whatever, if you track back and dig and do a little archaeologic dig, psychological autopsy, you might find that the originating issue is probably having to do with the profession somewhere along the way, okay? And so self-blame is also deadly. It hurts doctors. A second victim syndrome, which has been written about online. Stacia Dearman, if you're not familiar with her, she's a physician who's done a lot of work on this, helping other physicians with second victim syndrome. Medical mistakes have led to doctor suicide. Even if it's it's not your fault, you're pulled into even if you did nothing wrong, somehow doctors still have this self-blame thing. Well, what if I checked the labs yet? What if I would have changed the medicine? And then they can't stand it. They take their own lives. Assembly line medicine kills doctors like it almost sort of killed me. And censorship is part of the problem. The U.S. media rarely covers doctor suicide. Medical institutions cover up suicides. Family and religion cover up suicides. And the censorship just leads to more suicides. I mean, like if we were to not talk about high blood pressure, diabetes, or schizophrenia, like where would we be? Nowhere. This is a graph I put together of the first 1,103 physician suicides. They're divided, you can see at the bottom, 969 are physicians, 134 are medical students, 920 are from the US, 183 international. This is the breakdown of raw numbers that came to me, the first 1,103. This graph is not as important as the next one because I used 2016 AAMC Physician Specialty Data Report because there's different numbers of people per specialty, and when you break it down based on the numbers per specialty, you can see anesthesia is through the roof. Then we have surgery. I think the anesthesiologists die by suicide at 2.3 times the rate of surgeons and 5.5 times the rate of general internal medicine. According to my data, the first 1,103, we need more data. I'm not saying this is written in stone. This is just what I got, and it gives us a place to start the additional gathering of data. And the highest risk specialties, like I say, male anesthesiologist, highest risk group. I currently believe the highest risk people for suicide are anesthesiologists and veterinarians. That's a hunch that I have. And then after that, the rest of them fall into place, the rest of that chart there. Many are found dead inside of hospitals. The second one, like I said, was surgeons. Then we've got emergency medicine, OBGYN, psych. Psych is the highest out of non-surgical specialties for suicide, according to my data. So, by the way, doctors end their lives not because they really want to die, they just want to stop the pain and they can't figure out any other way, and they certainly have a lot of access, especially anesthesiologists. And what's surprising, but sort of not surprising when you think about it, is they have a great work ethic until the very end. You know, they're smiling and doing complex surgeries and cracking jokes, thumbs up to the surgical team, and then they shot themselves up in the closet. So like I said, late stage intervention is less effective because you only have 3 to 5 minutes. But here are the surprising revelations. Now we're going to go into sort of how to solve this and deeper dig. But physicians avoid care for fear of checking the yes box. This is an actual medical licensing initial application for the state of Alaska, a section of it. Okay? Look, this is pretty invasive. And this is like violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay? And so as a result, physicians fear sharing their mental health struggles with the medical board. That is not our friend. They're adversarial. Medical boards are there to protect the public from us. So they're fishing for reasons why they should do something with you, right? And keep you away from patients because you're dangerous. And so the physicians fear sharing their mental health struggles with medical boards and with each other because there's like this subtle sort of suggestion that we should turn each other in. You know, like see a doctor suffering, drinking a few extra drinks at a wedding, turn them in. Turn all these guys in. We'll take care of them. We'll beat the shit out of them. And so this is a problem. We have to, this is like if you're looking for the archaeologic dig, where do we start with this? This is the number one thing to do. We got to get rid of these questions. They're illegal and they are creating a huge hazard. They're creating this mask scenario, you know, where we're not safe to cry. You know, there's a woman who called me one day who was crying after the death of a patient, and she got in trouble, written up at work as unprofessional. She called me because she wanted to know if I had any research proof, like PubMed, that it's okay to cry. I was like, you've got to be kidding. Is this where we are with our profession? So I did a research project, and I want to give a big shout out to Ariana Palermini. She is a medical student who called me up and wanted to work with me all summer on any sort of she would do anything I want. I said, well, pull out every single initial licensing medical board application and pull out the mental health questions. Let's analyze them state by state. So our question was, do medical boards undermine physician mental health by breaching physician confidentiality and privacy? We analyzed all these applications. We identified the most favorable states for mental health. And just 3 questions to get you thinking about this. Is could a pediatrician in marriage counseling 10 years ago be mandated to disclose her therapy records to the state board? Yes. This is today, 2019. Could a dermatologist with postpartum depression 3 years ago be required to defend her competence before the board? Yes. Today, 2019. Should a medical student worry that a licensing board might read his psychological evaluation for anxiety? Yes. This is a problem. And so what physicians do is they pretend, deny, and lie, okay? That's what we do. I feel these questions could contribute to doctors not seeking help, especially for serious problems that could require mental health hospitalization. Do these questions have an adverse effect on doctors and medical students presenting or not for care they may desperately need? Yes, they certainly do. Why are mental health questions still allowed to be on there, asks a physician. I've had postpartum anxiety and depression 3 times now. I feel like it's none of their damn business, and it is not. So I have lied on my applications. This is the reality of what people, I know many of you in here have lied on your applications. You're with the majority. I mean, that's what people do. A friend of mine said, I used samples of Paroxetine and had my spouse write me prescriptions for citalopram, buspirone, and Paroxetine. I'm not as good at saying these quickly as you are. I have to pronounce every syllable. And sleeping pills over the years, reports one physician. I did not trust other doctors. I did not want any of this stuff in my medical records as I did not want to be seen as crazy, and this is how many doctors refer to psych patients. So physicians sneak off the grid care. Example, I've been in practice 20 years. I've been on antidepressants and anxiolytics for all that time, explains one doctor. I drive 300 miles to seek care, always pay cash. I am forced to lie on my state relicensing every year. There is no way in hell I would ever disclose this to the medical board. They are not our friends. I sought care an hour away. I drove an hour in another direction. How freaked out do you have to be to seek care and hide in this direction? And then drive 100 miles in another direction to nervously fill prescriptions for antidepressants, reports a physician. I required several meds to stop thinking of suicide all day, every day. My suicidal thoughts were 100% work-related. And we have honest physicians. So a lot of people are just lying, sneaking meds, mail away, pharmacy, getting prescription, right? But then we have this whole other group, which are like the really honest physicians. Like this, they're so honest that they want to correctly check the no box, so they will withhold getting care because they want to be honest on their applications, because that's their philosophy of life and their religion and all that, so they have to be honest, right? In residency, I had to do a rotation in Alaska, reports a hospitalist. The application asked if I had ever been on psychotropic medications or in counseling. I had taken sertraline 12.5 milligrams for 90 days due to anticipatory anxiety about starting intern year. Fortunately, my fears weren't realized, so I stopped the medication. I answered both questions affirmatively. This resulted in my having to defend myself to a panel of people on the Alaska Medical Board over the phone. How humiliating is that for an introvert who didn't even have the problem? It was an anticipatory, oh my, this is on. I mean, you wouldn't really believe this unless, I mean, if you're on a suicide helpline, you hear these stories all the time and they become more believable. But when I started, all this stuff seemed like the Twilight Zone, like unbelievable stories. They granted my license, but it was this is the same woman, they granted my license, it was a humiliating experience and definitely created barriers to my seeking care moving forward, both because I have not wanted to be in a position to have to answer those types of questions affirmatively, and due to financial barriers because I will not use insurance to defray costs of counseling since that may be discoverable. What a horrible culture of shame these questions create. Would you all agree this is a culture of shame? Created by our own industry, our own inside. How are we going to be there for school shooters and veterans and everyone else if we are tormented within our own industry? We certainly have to start here first, I would think. So when I applied for my Florida license, it was delayed by months. Reports a gynecologist, I was required to have a psych evaluation by an approved doctor due to my history of depression. These approved doctors are part of these, I don't know, I'm saying conflict of interest, kickbacks, there's all sorts of things going on with these approved doctors. Due to my history of depression, get on my website, talk to me later. There's much more to this. So an approved doctor due to my history of depression, which was treated and well managed. It fell under the impaired physician program and definitely was stigmatizing. To this day, I don't answer those questions honestly anymore, and I'm hesitant to seek treatment as needed. Do we really want to create a situation where physicians are scared to get medical care? And that's what we've done. So to summarize here, you've got 3 problems. Physicians are self-treating and lying, which is a problem, because most of them are not psychiatrists, and even if you are a psychiatrist, self-treatment probably not a good way to go. Physicians sneak off the grid care, and I should have put and lie on that one, because the top 2 are forced to lie, and these are people that really probably don't want to lie, but they feel forced to lie. And then we've got the whole big group of honest physicians who won't get care because they want to tell the truth and they want to check the no box. Every way you slice this and dice it, it's a problem. And so here are the results from this investigation, this research project that I did. This was really fun. What we got to do, I mean, it seemed painful at the beginning, especially if I was going to be the one pulling all these reports, but thank God the medical student helped me. Ariana is a godsend. But what we did is we actually graded the states from grade A through F. It felt really pleasurable to grade medical boards. You know, after we've been graded so much ourselves by every regulatory body out there, you know, I was like, whew, this is fun. I'm going to grade the medical boards. Grade A states had no mental health questions or 1 to 2 straightforward current impairment questions that do not mention mental health. 13 states fell in that category. This is a little dense, but just go to idealmedicalcare.org. You can read the full version of this 9,000-word piece with all the 100 comments afterwards, and add in your own if you've had an experience. What's really interesting is Connecticut, Michigan, New York, and Hawaii are the most physician-friendly of all states. They ask no mental health or impairment questions. So there is precedent that 4 states are not asking any questions. In fact, when I called Hawaii Medical Board, it was just so relaxing because they were like, aloha, which is very different than what happened in Alaska, which has 25 yes or no mental health questions. Maybe some of this has to do with where the state is and how happy people are and what climate they're in. I don't know. I list Massachusetts here because it's an example of a straightforward question. The other problem is so many of these mental health questions have multiple commas, clauses. You can't even figure out, even as a pro at multiple choice questions, you can't really figure out what the question is aiming at except your career. So this is an example of a question that makes sense. Do you have a medical or physical condition that currently impairs your ability to practice medicine? That's a question anyone can understand, and I think that's good wording, right? So here, what I graded the other states, right? Grade B are states with progressive mental health questions. So they mention mental health, but they link it only to current impairment. Grade C states are states with mental health questions where they want to know your mental health for the past 5 years. Grade D states are states that have you ever had questions related to mental health beyond 5 years, or like in Georgia, they require peer references where your friends who you work with in the next cubicle get to write about your mental health for you, which is very unnerving, and they're not even psychiatrists, at least most of them ask, so, it's a problem. So here are the worst states. Grade F states are, and you can see all the states that fit in every category. I didn't want to burden the slideshow with all sorts of detail, but I wanted you to see the A and F states just so you could get an idea. These are states with highly invasive mental health questions. Probably each one has 12 commas in there, unlinked to current impairment that contain confusing, punitive, or adversarial language. And we have Alabama, Alaska, Delaware, Florida, Mississippi, Rhode Island, and Washington are the worst. Alaska has 25 yes or no mental health questions and is the very worst when it comes to mental health licensing applications. And I only looked at the initial licensing applications. I haven't really analyzed. It took all summer just to do the initial. I didn't do the renewals, but so here are some examples of things people had to say. I'm amazed at the punitive terms I've had to face in recovering professionally from a depressive episode for which I was hospitalized last year, reports a psychiatrist. One of my requirements is to be urine tested for substance abuse, despite multiple demeaning assessments that have rendered the clear verdict that I don't have a substance abuse problem. I've had to attend costly treatments for professionals in which I am the only female in a group of male physicians who had sex with their patients, have become assaultive with staff. Any efforts on my part to point out that I don't quite fit are taken as further evidence of my pathology. I'm a single parent as well, so each of these treatments I'm required to attend takes me away from my 2 children for extended periods of time. Throughout all this, nobody has told me how common my feelings are, that a large number of doctors feel depressed and suicidal at times. Rather, I've been told that my actions are unheard of for someone in mental health and may preclude me from ever providing therapy again, since we tell patients never to give up hope, but you did. Hopefully, in the near future, this won't be a taboo topic, and there will be places for those like me to seek responsible and confidential health care. And I just want to say these are physician health programs that these doctors are sent to, where you end up in a room with 2 people with a 10-month community college degree, now putting down all sorts of things on your chart, but that's not considered practicing medicine, and then you lose your license. This is just total crap. I can't believe this is going on. But the first time I heard about it, I thought the person I was talking to was delusional. But then I heard it again and again in all these different states, and I'm like, we have a really big problem with physician health programs. After the unexpected death of a patient, some physician health programs are good if you have substance abuse issues, but not for postpartum depression. And this woman here had an unexpected death of a patient. So she sought counseling because she was having a reaction to that. By a stroke of bad luck, I picked the only one in town in charge of impaired physician monitoring. That's a pretty bad luck stroke. That's the opposite of the lottery. He told the board, though stable, I should be monitored. I had to defend myself in front of the Florida board. They laughed in my face and then posted in the local newspapers that I was sentenced to 5 years of monitoring. I had mandatory Wednesday group therapy. Though I was an exemplary physician, my employers had to be told why I was unavailable for call every Wednesday. Each time I re-credential with hospitals, I have to explain the whole thing again. HIPAA for me does not exist. I have never missed a single day of work for mental health. Can you tell I'm a little angry? Sorry. I am angry about this. I think we should all be furious about this. I think psychiatrists should be at the helm of changing this. I'm happy to help, do my little part as the doctor in Oregon waving the flag, but please help me. Do you know what really hurts? The fact that anyone can look me up on the internet and read my dirty laundry, explains one doctor. I'm publicly shamed by the medical board, punished for being ill. I will only know peace when I am gone. I mean, this guy couldn't even date because women would look him up online and see all this stuff. I mean, this is like, oh, it's so unfair. The peer reference on mental health is from Georgia, which is a grade D state. They don't have an impairment or mental health question for the physician, but they want 3 of your cubicle physician friends to answer, does this physician have or has this physician had in the past any mental or physical illness or personal problems that interfere with his or her Do you think Ben Schaefer's going to go tell his friend like he's struggling if his friend might have to fill one of these out? I mean, this is a deterrent. This is a huge deterrent. Now, Wyoming is a grade A state, and they have they require a peer reference, but they don't ask anything. It's just a straight like, is this doctor competent question. So that's fine. I'm not against peer references, but stop getting in everyone's business with their psych history. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to ask a reference about a physician's knowledge, integrity, you know? The stigma is so severe. I have so many quotes, you can read them later, but why don't we stay on target with what we really want to know is, are you safe with patients? That's what we want today. We want to know that, right? So these questions pose barriers to seeking mental health care. They create collegial distrust when physicians fear revealing their struggles with peers who may report them to boards. So here's the solutions. Here's what we do. We got to remove these mental health questions. This is the number one thing. If we could do this, oh, our profession will be so much better and we will lose so many fewer people. Please, I'm begging you. Get these illegal questions. If you're in one of those, over half the states still have these questions that violate the Americans with Disabilities Act. Call all your smart attorney friends, get them on this, and we need to be actively petitioning and showing. You know what? Some of these states, by the way, you can't even get them on the phone. Aloha was really nice, Hawaii, but like Washington didn't like that I made them an F, and some people were like, they didn't really think they deserved an F, but we're trying to call them. We haven't got a call back in 2 weeks. I mean, you can't even get a hold of these people. And then some of the states were like, well, we've updated our language, but you go on their website, it still says that you still have the 2012 version up on your website. And then they have this long, my dog ate the homework story about why it's not. It's like, well, see, changing something. I have a website. I could change things. Like I could update. If there's a typo, I can go on there right now and change it. I don't know why it's taken you 3 years to update something that you decided you were going to take off at a committee meeting 3 years ago. They do this. There's several states that are like, it doesn't seem to make sense why they still have the question because they voted to get rid of it, but it's still on there. So this is the question that I would suggest that we use. Do you currently have a condition that impairs your ability to practice medicine? It's very simple, straightforward. Comply with federal law. It's called the Americans with Disabilities Act. Or follow the best practices of grade A states, or maybe the 4 states that don't have any of these questions. And then there is the sort of pedophilia, kind of criminal predatory behavior area. We'll move those to the criminal section, okay? Move that next to the DU. Don't put postpartum depression and anxiety and seasonal affective disorder next to a DUI and all this other, and felonies. I mean, that's stigmatizing mental health issues as a crime. So that's number one. And this is I love this guy who did this, so listen to this. As the chair of a large academic department of anesthesiology, I'm frequently asked to complete credentialing reference forms. I recently received one such form that I found concerning. Among the various questions to which I was asked to respond was one asking if the provider had ever received treatment for mental health related issues. As I completed the form, I circled the offending question, inserted my concerns that this is the type of question that creates barriers to healthcare professionals seeking mental health care services. Having made my point, I submitted the form, assuming that was the last I'd hear of it. Well, what do you know? Surprisingly, a couple of weeks later, I got an email from the member of the facility's credentialing committee asking to speak with me or to better understand my concern. I contacted him, was pleasantly surprised by his immediate acknowledgement of my concern. He asked how he could improve the question. I suggested they could put it in the context of inquiring as to current limitations of the ability to provide care in place of their all-encompassing ever qualifier. He promised to make the change to the question and thanked me for pointing it out. So this goes beyond medical boards because we have to answer these questions on being in network with insurance companies, hospital credentialing. I mean, I think once we do this with medical boards, we should across the board get rid of this everywhere. So be on the lookout for these questions and circle them and make a stink and get them to remove them. I mean, once people realize this is a problem, at least outside of medical board circles, like physicians are willing to change these questions. And that was Ronald Harder, who is an anesthesiologist. The other thing is these are 3 solutions. So the number 1, get rid of these illegal questions. Number 2, encourage everyone to have non-punitive confidential mental health care. I think everyone in a high-risk profession, firefighters, police officers, all of us in high-risk professions where we see terrible things should all be in therapy or have a therapist on speed dial. You know, like we should know who, it shouldn't be that people in New York are calling Pamela because they can't figure out who they could talk to in New York. I mean, that's a population-dense state. There's got to be someone there you trust, right? I mean, I'm happy to do it, but it would be so much easier if there was a local person. So most physicians enter medicine as humanitarians with noble intentions. Let's help physicians be well. Like really think about it. How can we as physicians give care to patients that we've never received? I'm going to take a breath because that's important. To breathe and also to understand what I'm saying there. So, you know, finally, the final quote came from a surgeon the other day. Physicians are treated as criminals, tracked more closely than level 3 sex offenders, reports a surgeon. Answering all these questions on applications, the subtle unspoken lesson is you had better be squeaky clean, mentally, morally, and physically. If you step off the shining path, bad things will occur. I have known 7 male physicians who died by suicide, most with a happy exterior. Why? They cannot confide in colleagues for fear that their colleagues will turn them in hospitals and medical boards. And there goes their privileges and their livelihood. They cannot confide in their spouses because during rough patches mentally, their marriages are already in trouble and they'll just bring that right into the courtroom. If they share psychological problems, they probably fear that the wife may use this as ammunition in any future divorce. So they keep on smiling right up to the hour they die. This is the situation we're in. And finally, my big overall plea that we could all start doing today, I mean, I wish I could snap my fingers and get rid of these questions on medical boards. If anyone's a hacker and knows how to get into these IT systems, we could get in there and take all those questions off tonight. Just talk to me afterwards. The other one, what was the non-punitive mental health care? Please open your office doors. Consider seeing your colleagues and keeping this confidential. But the most important thing that we can all do today, immediately after the session, into the evening, if some of you, I'm going to be here till tomorrow. If you want to go out to dinner, let's all hang out. I'm happy to be your best friend, and we can keep talking about this forever. I'm a late night person. I stay up till like 2, 3 in the morning. If you can DSM me, great. I'd love to know what's wrong with me. But anyway, what we really need to do is share our story. Share our story because it's therapeutic for you and it's therapeutic for your colleagues. They'll be like, oh, I'm not the only one. It creates collegial trust and bonding. And it destigmatizes physician mental health. And I would really like to ask that we, at least in this family at the Psych Congress, feel safe enough to take off our mask and be human with one another. We can do that here, I believe, with safety. And so this is just a summary. Remove mental health questions, number 1. Number 2, encourage non-punitive confidential care and share your story. I have a free audiobook for all of you, which has 53 chapters of physician survival stories. I know it sounds terrifying, the title, Physician Suicide Letters. You'll hear my voice lulling you to sleep. Maybe it's better than reading a psych journal and looking at Valium ads, but as a bedtime story. But a few of the people in there have died by suicide, and their parents, of course, gave me their suicide letters and asked me to please publish them. And the rest of them are people who contacted me, and I did not use any names in here, so you don't know, I mean, I altered their identity a little bit, right? So they wanted to share their stories with other physicians. They survived their suicide. This is like being a fly on the wall on my suicide helpline. What does Weibel do? Well, what is she doing in the woods? Well, listen to what I say and do, and you'll get a sense of who I am. I think I'm much more mature now than at the time I put this book out in 2016. I'm a lot more, I understand this topic a lot better, but this was sort of my initial sort of outrage, like I can't believe this is happening, and here are some true stories book. And then I will end with another plea to please help me get all these dead doctors out of my house. I love them. I just don't have space for this many people in my house. It's a small house. To start with, my final slide, I'm going to show you, this is a happy doctor. Happy? This is a happy doctor. And I'm going to show you so you understand what a suicidal doctor looks like. So that's me in 2004. That's how I looked laying in bed for about 6 weeks. So that's a suicidal doctor. The problem is we don't see doctors walking around looking like this. You'd have to sneak into their house, take a picture of them. You know, some doctors actually who are suicidal have sent pictures of themselves to me, sobbing on the bathroom floor with just snot hanging out of their, just absolutely on the edge of death. And they've sent me pictures of them. So I have some pictures. I mean, I don't have permission to send. I'm going out on a limb here, sharing my story in hopes that this will inspire all of you to dig up your really depressing pictures and show people that you're human and that yet you're still a competent doctor that can run an ICU and can help your patients, and you actually do cry at night and you have survived being anxious and suicidal, and that actually makes you a better doctor because you actually understand what it's like to be human, and patients want human doctors. So I'll end there with 1 minute and 5 seconds to spare.